An enemy trying to remove the Emperor, a call to arms from every family, and the one girl who can save all of China? All this can only mean one thing. We're comparing Mulan on this episode of Retro versus Remake.
I'm Reggie Parker.
And I'm Dan Bulick. Welcome to another episode of Retro versus Remake. This is the series where we compare movies and their remakes. Join us as we answer the question, should this remake exist? Today's films are Mulan. So this episode, since we are doing Mulan and it's kind of out and it's still kind of fresh, even though we're releasing this a few weeks later, this is going to be very spoiler heavy. So if you have not seen the remake, do not listen to this. Putting it out there right now, I'm just saying it once, and here we go. The original Mulan, released in 1998, starring Ming-Na Wen, Eddie Murphy, B.D. Wong, Miguel Ferrer, June Foray, James Hong, Pat Morita, and George Takei. Directed by Barry Cook and Tony Bancroft. Screenplay by Rita Hsiao, Philip Lezebnik, Chris Sanders, Eugenia Bostwick-Singer, and Raymond Singer. Music by Jerry Goldsmith. Mulan 2020, starring Liu Yifei, Donnie Yen, Zima, Jason Scott Lee, Yosun An, Ron Yuan, Gong Li, and Jet Li. Directed by Nikki Caro. Screenplay by Rick Jaffa, Amanda Silver, Lauren Hynek, and Elizabeth Martin. Music by Harry Gregson Williams. We've seen him before in our Total Recall episode, Reggie. I don't know if you remember that name, but video game people know it because he did the music for the Metal Gear series. Okay, both of these films are based on the Chinese poem, The Ballad of Mulan. Obviously, the remake takes a lot of heavy influence from the original. All right, Reggie, what is your first experience with either film? I feel like I know your first experience with the remake.
Yeah, first experience with the original film, 1998. That makes me 10 years old in that year, so I guarantee I saw it, whether it was in a theater, at some summer camp, school, somewhere. Mulan was a big deal. McDonald's Happy Meals will let you know that as well. They also even had that special like sauce that was a big deal in like Rick and Morty. Remember that the Mulan Szechuan sauce?
Yeah, I don't remember that from when I was a kid, but Rick and Morty made a big deal about it, so sure.
Yeah, so familiar with that, and then this remake, of course. I mean, it just came out. We're early adopters.
Yes, we laid down $30 hard cash to watch this bad boy.
Yes, we did.
I actually did not see the original Mulan when it came out. I only saw it kind of maybe recently. I wasn't too familiar with it. I was sort of familiar with her because she was in one of the Kingdom Hearts games. So I kind of knew something with fireworks sometimes, and I knew kind of Eddie Murphy did a voice, but I hadn't seen it until, I don't know, sometime in the 2010s. And then rewatched it for this podcast, and of course, like you, just watched the remake yesterday, actually. So pretty fresh off the remake.
We wanted to address a few of the controversies with the Mulan movie. There's a few of them out there, so let's just kind of take some of the main ones. A lot of the film was filmed in the Xinjiang region of China, which has its own controversy. There's a group of like an ethnic group of people called the Uyghurs in China. It's a Muslim population there that are currently going through some, real issues when it comes to human rights in that country. China has not been, from my research, very fair to that group of people, to put it mildly. And we wanted to address the fact that, Disney choosing to film here is sort of a tacit, um, you know, for lack of a better word, endorsement for this behavior. So that's definitely something that we wanted to address. Um, we don't necessarily factor in this controversy with our review of the movie, but we want you to be aware of it so that you can make your own decision about whether or not you want to support this. Some other issues we wanted to bring up is the lead actress has been under a little bit of heat for her sort of pro Hong Kong stance in the sense of pro China, the main government, and their treatment of people in Hong Kong, which is an active controversy. So that's two active controversies in one film. And the third, just to put a nice cherry on the top, one of the main ones is that the director of the film is not any sort of Asian or Chinese background. It's a woman from New Zealand, Nikki Caro. For some people, that is a shortcoming for this film as well. The fact that the director doesn't quite meet the criteria for some of the inclusiveness that they wanted with the film. So I'll say that the film does a decent job of representation relative to what we typically get in Hollywood, but these are just three things that I think we would be remiss not to mention. So just wanted to bring it up. If you choose to support or enjoy the film, feel free, but we just wanted you to know that.
Yeah, I really don't have much to add. Pretty much what we said when we did the Red Dragon episode. Like to separate the artist from the work. So, like the lead actress thing, don't want to damn a whole movie just because of her opinions, because a lot of people worked on this. Although that Disney thing about filming in that region now, it's even like even more shady. But
Yeah, you even get like at the end of the movie in the credits, they have basically like a thank you to the Chinese state government for being super cool. I think that's par for the course if you're doing business in China, and obviously when you're making a film like this, that is part of the goal. So I understand some of the pressure to do so, but to that same extent, knowing what we know about sort of the human rights violations that are happening, I don't know if it was their best choice, but you be the judge.
That being said, back into our review. All right, well, these films are very similar. There's some name changes, so my synopsis isn't as clean as I'd like, but they still pretty much follow the same story. Before our comparison, here is a brief synopsis. China is under attack by a powerful invading army. In an effort to fight back, the emperor decrees an imperial army should be made, one that requires one man from every family. Meanwhile, we are introduced to Mulan. She's not like other girls. She's not interested in preparing to be a wife, but craves adventure and excitement, usually reserved for men. She also has no males in her family except her disabled father. After failing to impress a matchmaker, the order of the emperor reaches Mulan's village. Mulan's father, being the only male in his family, has to volunteer, against Mulan and her family's wishes. Mulan then takes matters into her own hands and will go in her father's place pretending to be a man. With her father's sword, armor, and horse, she leaves her family in the middle of the night. When her family realizes that Mulan has left, they decide they have to let her go. If they out Mulan, she will most likely be executed. All they can do is pray to their ancestors to guide her. When Mulan arrives at camp, she immediately butts heads with the other recruits. She also goes through some extreme lengths to make sure that her identity stays hidden. Mulan overcomes adversity, not only winning favor of her fellow soldiers, but proves to be one of the best warriors. She even has a strong connection with one particular man in camp. Finally, day has come when they have to fight the enemy. Mulan's garrison come across a battle site where allies have been slaughtered by the enemy. Eventually, they do fight the enemy, though. They are outmatched, and the enemy gets the upper hand. With some creativity from Mulan, she is able to cause an avalanche and turn the tide of battle. And even though this is a victory, Mulan reveals her true identity to everyone. Instead of execution, she is exiled from the garrison. It is later revealed the enemy plans to go straight for the emperor. Mulan goes to her former troops and begs them for help. They yield, and Mulan leads them to save the emperor. After lots of fighting, Mulan comes face to face with the leader of the enemy troops. She is ultimately able to defeat him and save the emperor. She is rewarded for her efforts and invited a high-ranking position. Mulan also shares a moment with a potential love interest from her garrison. Mulan eventually returns home. Her family is happy to see her, especially her father, since she has brought not shame, but honor. Her ancestors can look upon her proudly. The end. Okay, so a lot of what happens in both films is pretty much the same. I guess the first place we can start is just one's an animation and one's live action. We've kind of done this before with our 101 Dalmatians episode, but maybe we can just go into, I guess, the strength of being an animated film and the strength of being a live action film.
Because it's 2020, I think the gap between sort of animation and live action has actually lessened. Like if you think of different things like Game of Thrones, for instance, you can do some pretty sort of fantastical things in live action that you really weren't able to do before. Like the CGI used to look bad and stuff like that. Um, Animation, you have just a general freedom to really do whatever you want visually. And I'll say this that from the perspective of the original film, I do like a lot of the choices that they made with the animation in terms of just kind of like a cohesive vision and you know maintaining clarity throughout the film. But I think this remake also has some very strong points when it comes to animation. Without jumping too early into this, I'd say what they do with the sort of the guardian spirit, as it were, I think was done well in this remake. In a way I wasn't expecting. It was just there was less emphasis on it, but the visual still was I found to be striking. What was your take on that?
When you think of animation, you immediately think like more of a kids friendly kind of a movie, and then the live action maybe a little more adult, and that's kind of what we have here. The animated version definitely speaks more to children. Yeah, to your point, the guardian spirit, having to talk to her, that makes sense in a child's animated film. Wouldn't exactly work in a live action film, so they did make those decisions to not go that route for the live action film. We use this word a lot. It's just more gritty. I
Yeah.
mean, these are essentially movies about war, and
Mhm.
there's definitely a different way that you deal with it when you deal with it in animation versus live action. You can get away with certain things in animation that you can't do if you do live action. And I think overall that they made some pretty good choices in the live action film to, you know, broach this serious subject matter of war, because it can't be really too kid friendly. Too much hand holding with like nice songs and animals that talk. It does have to be a little more in the real world, even though it's not entirely in the real world.
Sure. Yeah, I found like your point about thematically, if you watch that original film, let's just call it's an animated comedy, more or less.
Yeah.
There's more sort of like you mentioned mature subject matter when it comes to war, but they really do handle it with kid gloves throughout the film, and I think that part of what the movie needs to do because it is designed for that sort of traditional Disney crowd. Uh, you know, Mulan falls in the category slightly, I guess, as Disney princess, not exactly, but in that realm. So there's a clear goal to have a constant barrage of jokes. So whether it's your grandmother crossing the street with a cricket, that's a joke. When you're preparing for war, that's a joke. When um, there's just this constant need to kind of hit different jokes, and I'm sure we'll talk about that a little bit with casting. Whereas in the remake, I you know I think I recall a few sort of lighthearted moments, but to your point, overall, this is sort of the gritty. I would say not too gritty, but the gritty reboot to Mulan, and they just handle the subject matter. I think a little bit more, like you mentioned, mature, and they're not handheld to have to try to make you laugh. They really just have to tell you the story, and I think to your point as well, for the most part, I think they handle that fairly well.
Yeah. And not only does the animated film like have more humor, but it has like more slapstick humor,
Yeah.
and you definitely couldn't get away with that doing a live action film. So, good decision to kind of stay away from that kind of comedy and then just keep it a little more subtle, just like when the soldiers are hanging out, just kind of joshing each other. And
Yeah.
so, doing stuff like that makes sense. So I think the world that they built in the remake is, it's a little more mature, and it just overall it works. And if you translated it like one to one, like a lot of these Disney remakes are just one to one translations, it definitely wouldn't work. And the decision to kind of let's cut back on some of that humor, just let's just make it a little more like a typical sort of war film, right? Let's not make it full of joke after joke.
Even in their jokes, because as you were saying, I was thinking of one. Even in some of their jokes, there's still some of the tension that leads back into the story. Like, for instance, there's kind of like this running joke of someone kind of like leaning over in the bed and
Mm.
she's got to cover up and stuff like that. And like that's both a terrifying moment and funny. And like they somehow find a way to find that tone of like reminding you that there is tension here, that there is danger for this lead character, but they don't I don't think that they overdo it. Like I never
Yeah.
felt like, oh my god, like I
Yeah.
gotta go get a glass of water, like you know.
Yeah, I wasn't too worried that Mulan would get found out, like, when those moments would happen. I didn't feel like, oh man, this is really messing with her psyche, like, this whole thing that I'm pretending to be a man, they're gonna find out I'm a woman. They
Mhm.
definitely are able to walk that line pretty well in the remake.
Yeah, yeah. I will say, watching it with my wife, there was some moments in that she was like, "Oh, geez, they're gonna figure it out." So like the tension was ramped up because we definitely didn't have a moment like that in the kid '98
Hmm.
version. So no, I think overall, to your sort of I guess ultimate point though, um, the original film, animated, kid friendly. The Szechuan sauce at McDonald's. You hit your marketing and your jokes. I think they nailed it. And then this remake for what they had to do. And to your point, I'm very glad they didn't do a 1-to-1 because that would have been
Hmm.
very boring. And I think that by switching things up, and we'll talk about this, even like the names of certain characters. Uh, I'm particularly talking about the villains. It builds intrigue because you're like, wait a minute, well they were this in the first movie. Why? What's happening in this movie? And there's enough of those sort of question marks that kept me engaged throughout the film.
Hmm. Yeah, so it's a lot more jokey, more kid friendly. Another thing, a big exclusion in the live action remake is the musical numbers.
Mm,
Again, just the live action remake going with that more serious, like what would actually happen in a war movie, I should say. It makes sense to, yeah, they're not gonna be training in camp, to kill other men and while they're doing it, sing fun little songs about being a
right.
man. So I was fine with getting rid of those songs. You do hear a little bit of one of the songs from the original in the score, and you
Hmm.
definitely hear it over the credits at the end. But I think overall, if we're gonna make this war movie and sort of, well, it's definitely more realistic than it was in the cartoon. You know, getting rid of the musical numbers definitely helps sell that sort of realistic take that they were going for.
Yeah, it's much more steeped in realism. They are able to tell um, different stories without having to rely on a musical. That's one of the strengths of a musical is you can kind of just you know I don't feel like writing this scene, so here's who's this guy? It's a guy. He's coming to the village. You can do
Hmm.
stuff like that, and they find interesting ways to translate those musical numbers into just more. A word that kind of keeps coming out to me, even with the battles or like set pieces, like everything feels more, like I said, grounded, and they find ways to hit those notes, but do it in a realistic way. And uh, overall, like I was saying, I think they land that pretty well.
All right, since so much of these movies are the same, I think when we talk about the characters, that'll really help our comparison here. So let's start with our main character, of course, Mulan. And you were talking about name changes before. We got a name change right here. So in the original, she's Fa Mulan, and that's portrayed by Ming Na Wen.
Maybe what I really wanted was to prove I could do things right. So when I looked in the mirror, I'd see someone worthwhile.
And then in the remake, she's Hua Mulan, portrayed by Liu Yifei.
Loyal, brave, and true. It is my duty to protect my family.
And also, just another little change. When she pretends to be a man in the original, her name is Ping. When she pretends to be a man in the remake, her name is Hua Jun.
Mm.
All right, so we definitely have different portrayals here for our Mulan character. I'm not sure where you want to start.
I guess let's kind of start with one of the major changes in the film. Bear
The
with me one
Force,
moment.
I mean, she.
Uh, Sort of, yeah, kind of. So I'll say this: while Mulan is again, I think in the remake, more sort of true to the original poem, like it's actually the name of this character, whether it's a real person or kind of like a folklore type character. That's the actual name, and we get introduced to her early in this remake film as a literal child, which we don't see in the original film. And you have her father, who we'll talk about doing the voiceover. Comparing it to like grass shooter or something like that. It's a metaphor, people. And she's like practicing battle. Like she's got like a staff and she's doing like different moves. And to your point as well, he brings up her chi, her ki, whatever you want to call it. And it's again, it's introducing an element of the film that is a major departure from the original as well, steeped in a true cultural reference. Like chi is a thing in China, and again, we can talk about different levels of it. I think they went a little bit more magical, as you mentioned in this film, but I like the idea of them sort of getting that element done in this scene because it prepares us for later on when we see some of the more magical elements. Like right here, we told you she's got chi. If you see chi, there's no questions because here it is. uh, did you think that was a smart choice, making her the young Mulan?
Yeah, definitely introducing that chi early because I wasn't sure how realistic they were going to go with the remake. And, you see her as the little girl in the fields, swinging her staff around. So, okay, that's pretty impressive. But later, when she's in the village chasing that chicken, and then she kind of saves herself from falling, and then through this crazy acrobatic stunt where she, like, inserts the staff into, like, part of the wall and, like, just, like, safely lands on the ground. So then you're like, okay, I think I know where this movie is when it comes to, like, what's real and what's possible. So it does help to set the tone, just seeing her do that in not so life-threatening situation as like a battle. Just see her kind of doing it in like every day, and then you could see how not only does it exist in this world, but if a girl does it, it's sort of frowned upon. So we're introduced to a couple different elements by introducing us to a young Mulan. So I thought that was a pretty good choice.
Yeah, and to your point, that's suppression, and that's a theme throughout the film. Like Mulan isn't able to truly realize her strength or her power because of, like you mentioned, societal constraints. She has to hide the fact that her chi is so strong. If she was, like you mentioned, if she was just a man, great, you're one of the greatest warriors in the village, awesome, you bring a lot of honor to your family, thanks. For her, it's like, oh, if people find out that you're this strong, you might be labeled a witch. And the movie smartly gives us an example later on that we'll talk about of how that can, go for someone in society. So more or less, you're still hitting a lot of these same notes, which is Mulan shouldn't be, I guess, who she really is, because it's going to create tension in her life. It's going to cause her to be ostracized and possibly bring shame to her family. So she has to really dial it back in. Versus in the original film, I don't know, you don't get this, at least early on, you don't really get this warrior vibe. I get more of she's intelligent, like she uses her intellect to basically make her chores easier. She's willing to kind of cheat on her, like how to be a girl test with the matchmaker. And it's a little bit more sort of lighthearted, and I think they portray her not as magical, but as an intellect. And that to me feels like her greatest strength. No, she's able to fight. I don't think her physical prowess is really, I don't think it's really highlighted as sort of like why she's able to beat out the men. It seems that she's able to sort of outsmart them is her greatest strength.
Yeah, that's one major contrast between the two Mulans. The one in the original, definitely more just like more of a tactician, a little more savvy, just able to think on her feet really fast. And then the remake, you're like, well, this one can kick ass.
Right.
You see her doing that stuff as a little kid, just wait till she gets older. She's going to fight. This one's not going to just, shoot some fireworks into the snow and make an avalanche. This one's going to go out there and kick some ass. So I was ready for that. I was like, okay, bring it on. I'm a huge fan of that. I'm just going to mention this right now. I'm a huge fan of the Dynasty Warriors series. I don't know if you've ever played this, Reggie.
Let me tell you. Yeah.
Okay, great. One of my favorite series takes place in ancient China. A few hundred years before the events of Mulan take place. But I dig that whole, like, huge Chinese armies just going at it with each other. So I love the whole like ancient China wars and battles and stuff. So I
Yeah.
was really excited to see that we were going to get a much more physical Mulan in this live action remake.
Yeah, and you make a good point with the Dynasty Warriors series, which does something really similar. It'll take like historical figures and stuff like that, real battles, and then just say, let's add a little bit of magic.
Yeah.
So like in that series, like you could have one guy on like horseback and he takes out 1,000 people. With,
Yep.
but like in some regards, it is based off of like real figures, and I would say that going back to one of the words I used earlier, like folklore, like this Mulan character, there's not controversy isn't the right word, but like there's an open question of like, does this person really exist, or is she like is she like Paul Bunyan almost? It's a folklore type of character, and I agree with you that I like that this film leans into the more sort of legendary, fantastical elements of the story. I think that by introducing the element early in her childhood, it allows us to then accept more magic as it comes along. And I think it's a really clean way to make the introduction in this film. The original, it's a clean intro. It gets one of the sort of the highlight songs of the film. You'll bring honor to us all, in which that's where we learn sort of what society expects from her. Like you've got to be sort of demure, dainty. Like seen but not heard. All these different sort of elements that are kind of talked about in the remake. They're just kind of thrown into a nice, clean song. Brings us right into the matchmaker, and no problems here understanding what's going on because we just sang it to you. And if you're not following, listen to the song again.
I don't know if I'm getting too far ahead here,
Mm-hmm.
but another just major difference between the two films is sort of when Mulan's exposed. In the original film, she's injured during the battle, and then when the doctor or the medic is taking care of her, then it's revealed, sort of against her wishes, that, oh, this is really a woman. But the remake, you had mentioned this earlier, in order to really unleash the full potential for Chi, she needs to be more true to who she really is. There's 3 sort of codes of honor that they talk about a lot in the movie. It's loyal, brave, and true. And she has loyal down, she has brave down, but she's obviously not being true since she's pretending to be a man. So there comes a battle, and then she ultimately has to just get rid of the lie, the disguise, and she has to sort of come out as Mulan. I thought that was a fantastic idea. Like, it's not just going to be an accident. She's going to make this conscious decision to be like, okay, I have to do this. I can't hide anymore. I can't keep this lie up, or else I'm not gonna make it, because I can't fight with this, this internal battle of like, who am I really?
It poisons her chi to lie, by not living her truth. She's not able to fully realize herself, and it's a much stronger message. To your point, like being kind of accidentally revealed, takes the agency, a word we like to use a lot, out of her hands, and just makes it more circumstantial. In this remake, she makes a conscious choice, and we haven't really talked about the spirit animals yet, but just to kind of jump into this early enough. In the original, it's a dragon. In the remake, it's a phoenix. It falls into that category of the tale of the phoenix. This fictional character, the Hua Jun, as you described, this sort of male successor to her father who doesn't exist. He doesn't exist. So when he dies, it allows Mulan to be sort of reborn as her true self. And there's such a change that you see in the battle, like her appearance changes. You don't get the same scene where she cuts her hair short. It's still sort of long. It's just tied up, and you see her like fully realize she's wearing this very like sort of visually striking red outfit, and just like whatever your beliefs are about gender or something like that, in the moment where someone comes in on horseback and is kicking ass and saving all of your lives, I think you start to throw that to the wayside. And I think also to your point with like Dynasty Wars, is when the movie really starts kind of picking up in the action too.
Mm-hmm.
Like it's a really strong battle sequence, especially once she sort of fully realizes her power. You get to really see this character in action. I think, again, strong choice to give her the decision to reveal herself, and it's strong to bring it into sort of the pillars of a true warrior. Like To your point, there's a scene where they have to make their oath, and it's loyalty, brave. And when truth comes, she can't even say it because she knows she's not living a truth. It's oh man, just another smart choice. And I think in a movie that has a lot of them, a lot of smart choices and changes.
I mean, you had mentioned the sort of spirit animals. Do you want to get into that a little bit more?
Yeah, I mean, in the films, right? So we keep talking about this Mulan character, but like on the off chance you don't understand who it is, audience, she is this different girl. Like while everyone else is worried about matchmaking and getting married, she has just different interests in mind. And when sort of the empire is being attacked, and her father's called to arms, who is injured, and we'll talk about that a little bit more. She makes a conscious choice in both films to more or less take his place, go out and fight this battle to her own personal peril and possibly her family's dishonor. Um, Given that it's kind of like long odds that she has, her family more or less prays to their ancestors and asks the ancestors to basically back her up. Help Mulan. In the original film, you get Eddie Murphy as Mushu.
Who am I? I am the guardian of lost souls. I am the powerful, the pleasurable, the indestructible Mushu.
Again, talking about another kind of funny beat, when you have a comedian in Eddie Murphy who's really playing into the humor of the moment, and he kind of screws up, and he's supposed to release the Stone Dragon, a much more formidable dragon, and he kind of breaks him. Old Stony. They had time to throw that side story in. In the remake, it's there's a phoenix that gets broken. Sort of, it's a family sort of statue representing her ancestors in the front of her home in the village, and it gets broken, but it gets fixed. Blah blah blah, and she gets like this phoenix figure that sort of follows her in the battle, and it's revealed that the phoenix also followed her father into battle.
Ancestors, please protect her.
What do you have in terms of like the phoenix and the choice of how they did it?
I definitely didn't think they were going to do Mushu. Just having a little talking dragon didn't seem. It just didn't seem like it would work in the live action remake. The Phoenix wasn't too bad. It's used sparingly, and it seems to be used sort of pivotal moments throughout Mulan's journey. Whether it's just I don't know where to go, or where's the camp, or like now, like you said before, when she decides to shed the Huajun skin and just be Mulan, or even at the final battle. Just a lot of pivotal moments it almost seems like just to give her that extra burst of like energy or whatever she needs just to keep going. Whenever she's like unsure that she can do what needs to be done, she'll see this phoenix, and then she's like, okay, I do have the power to do the necessary task at hand. So it's a little cliche, the phoenix rising, but it worked. I don't think it was overdone, so I didn't mind it.
I was right there with you, where I was literally hoping that the thing wouldn't talk.
Yes.
I was like, I do not need. Like, I just felt like it would have taken us out of the movie. I'm sure the directors and the writers thought the same thing. So it's just striking visual image. I would say if I was rating this is kind of an aside, but if I was rating the CGI in this film, I'd probably throw it in the B category. I couldn't give it exactly an A plus or anything like that. There's a few moments where the visuals seem to not really match the budget, as it were. But it wasn't bad by any means. It just wasn't like the best CGI I've seen. And to your point, I appreciate that they use that the Phoenix sparingly. As sort of visually look good in the big open landscapes. Kind of interacting with her. I could do with less of it, but they use it so infrequently that it doesn't really take away from anything. And you're right, it just gives a little extra emphasis on these moments of the character sort of overcoming something, and it fits again in a narrative. To your point, possibly a cliche way, but I think they stay away from it enough that it doesn't feel like they're beating you over the head with this imagery.
Yeah, and correct me if I'm wrong, but I'm pretty sure like she's the only one who could see it. is what I got a sense of, because nobody ever looks in the sky when that phoenix is around. It's only her kind of looking at it, as opposed to Mushu, who I'm pretty sure everybody could see, hear, whatever you want to do.
Yeah, I think like to that point, like Mushu has to like hide and stuff like that. And you're right, there are moments where he can be seen, and he uses that to try to like scare people sometimes, things like that. I just kind of like the idea that she's the only one that can see it. It makes sense. It's like it's her ancestors.
Yeah.
It's the spirit world, as it were. There's no reason for anyone else to be interacting with the Phoenix. And like we were saying, it's not like the Phoenix is all over the place either. If I'd imagine there was anyone that could see that Phoenix, it was likely the other sort of villain that uses chi as well, that we'll talk about.
So I was fine with no Mushu. I was definitely fine with no Cricket. I was like, that would have been really silly if she's like the whole time she's like carrying this little Cricket into battle. So I was like, okay, we don't have the Cricket. I'm fine with that.
Yeah, it was smart for them to sort of just reappropriate the Cricket and have like there's basically a character, one of the soldiers that is more or less his nickname is Cricket, and I think he's lucky, but it doesn't play that heavy into the storyline. And you know what? That's about how much attention a Cricket needed in the film. So a good, I'd say cut, but like good adaptation to just make the reference and not have to like overdo it.
All right. I mean, I'm good with Mulan. I'm sure we'll talk about her as we talk about the other characters. So I was thinking of moving on to the big baddie.
Sure.
All right. We have our bad guy, who is named different in both films. In the original, he's Shan Yu, portrayed by Miguel Ferrer.
The little girl will be missing her doll. We should return it to her.
And in the remake, he is Bori Khan, portrayed by Jason Scott Lee.
We are under attack from northern invaders.
Their leader calls himself Bori Khan.
Very different. Just the armies that they're leading are different. We have the Huns in the original versus the Roran in the remake. Again, being a little more true to that poem, because it was the Roran that they were fighting in that poem.
In the original film, and you can kind of blink and miss this if you want to, we're introduced to our villain before we're introduced to our lead. And although you would kind of expect to, because you get him so early and he seems to be important, you would expect Shan Yu to be like more fleshed out. Not really. He's kind of mad at the Emperor for taunting him with his Great Walls. Like, how long were you around while this wall was being made? Like, the only thing I can really say about like Shan Yu, because his motivation is kind of flimsy. He's just like he's a raider. He wants to basically overtake the Empire, just to overtake it. They make some interesting choices sort of visually with them. Like they really lean into almost like this Genghis Khan style Hun army. They've made them gray for some reason. They have like a gray tone, but like I get it. It's a visual. How do you quickly sort of differentiate your good guys versus your bad guys? He's a physically imposing character, the way he's drawn and stuff like that. But outside of that, that's really kind of all you need to know about Shan Yu. Tough bad guy, kind of mean.
I was just gonna say, yeah, he has like control over that army. Like nobody's gonna question him. Like whatever he says goes. Not necessarily the case with Bori Khan. He does have some people go, well, I don't know if I want to do it for these reasons. So Shan Yu, totally in control, this imposing figure, a bit one-dimensional, like you said, but he's just our big baddie. And as 90s animated villains goes, he gets the job done.
Yeah, you make him kind of scary, and give him an imposing sort of voice and look, and you're done there. He's a bad guy, and to your point, he fits squarely in the category of big bad, and he's unquestioned in his power.
He has this like, you mentioned that Shan Yu doesn't really have a motivation or that we know of, just like maybe he wants power, but Bori Khan, it's a little more personal with him. Why he wants to take out the Emperor, because his father, also named Bori Khan, was murdered by the Emperor. So, you killed my dad, I'll kill you. Kind of that logic going on. So he's got a little more motivation, but he also wants the riches and the wealth as well.
Right. He reminds me a lot of our big bad in the Conan movie, in a few ways in the remake. In the sense that, yes, he has a specific motivation with his father being killed, but he's also willing to use some different means. Like, most people would advise you not to use witchcraft, as it were, when trying to take over the world. But he's more or less sort of exploiting another character in the film and using her powers, which is, again, another, in my opinion, good change, because it sort of gives you a backdrop for Mulan as well. So we replaced a hawk, the original film, with Gong Li's Zhang Long.
Fights alongside a witch.
No survivors.
First of all, I want to say, in terms of character additions, motivating factors and stuff like that, I don't think you could come up with a better character to sort of add to a film than this, because she just adds so many different layers to what you mentioned before. It could just be a one-dimensional, you kill my dad, I kill you character. She gives you, one, magic. Magic's always good, especially when you introduce that your lead has magic as well. You get to see what happens to people that use their magic, sort of without trying to suppress it, and more or less you get shunned from society. And it gives us this beautiful backdrop of, well, you could be like me, it's almost like that Luke Skywalker.
Yeah, I got a lot of Star Wars vibes from this.
We could rule the empire.
I wrote that in my notes as I was when she goes to Mulan, like, join me. I was like, okay, Darth Vader.
In Disney, that check. But even as kind of silly as that is, I think you get some of the best visuals and the best stakes from this sort of, the person that and my wife kind of mentioned this, the person that kind of should be the bad guy, but because of like society's limitations, just isn't. And Bori Khan has to kind of rein in that character and say, okay, even though you're more powerful than me, it's not going to work if you're the one that takes over. And then he has to like fight amongst his own men. It's like, look, I know it's a witch, but hear me out, guys. Did you see what you just did over there? I like that sort of 1-2 punch, and I think that by punching it up with Gong Li's character, it really elevated this villain and kind of made the stakes make a lot more sense to me.
Yeah, she's a really interesting character. Just her introduction was pretty interesting. Like, they're on the Silk Road. There's this random merchant traveling there, and then she just kind of appears. And then they don't show you what happens, but they show you like her shadow going into his shadow, and you're just like, what's happening here? And then you just see him by himself walking to this market area. And then Bori Khan and his army start to approach the gates, and then she's inside, and then she like reveals that she is the merchant, and it's like, I thought at first like, oh, she's actually a good guy, but then she gets a couple knives and stabs all the guards. It's like, oh, she's a bad guy. Okay. So I thought she was gonna help defend the village. Nope, now she's gonna help kill everybody, and then she could transform into people. So her powers not fully defined, but we know she could transform into other people. She can transform into a hawk. Her hands, when she's in human form, are like claw or talons of a hawk. So I thought that was a really cool character design right there.
Very smart character design.
She has this makeup job on her face where like half of it's like painted black or something, and the other half's painted white, like above the eyes and stuff. It's definitely memorable, her look. And then yeah, like you said, she does seem like she is the most powerful person in that enemy army, and she could easily overtake Bori Khan, but he has this hold over her where I guess she was like kind of down in the dumps, and he sort of helped her out of there. And you gotta remember what they did for you, or remember what I did for you, or else
that part wasn't very well,
it wasn't well defined. Yeah, I know, because it's like, well, you could easily crush this guy. I don't know what I thought, like they were gonna reveal some like, I don't know, maybe he had like some talisman that like her powers were linked to, and then if he destroyed it, she would lose her powers. I thought they were gonna do something like that. But it's okay what they did, I guess, because she ultimately does kind of betray him at the end, and that's kind of what you were hoping would happen because she is more powerful than him.
I think sort of her motivation falls into some of the limitations, and it comes back later with Mulan. Just kind of jumping ahead a little bit, when Mulan is like leading the army after her reveal and her powers come into like their true strength. She sees that it's possible. Like her whole need, Gong Li's character, for having Bori Khan there is that okay, yeah, she could kill everybody, but then like then what? Bori Khan kind of gives her this roadmap where basically, all right, this guy takes over, he can kind of change the society and make it more acceptable for me to just exist, as it were. But she realized that she's kind of signed herself into servitude. She's now Bori Khan's slave. And like you said, she's definitely down in the dumps about that. But, she kind of comes to light when she realizes that Mulan was able to do something that she wasn't, even with all of her power, which was get society, question mark, but get society to accept her and, to be able to lead in this army. So Mulan offers promise in a lot of different ways to this character, whether it's, hey, both of us combined, like we could just be running this whole show, or realizing that there's another route and like for some reason it's too late for me, I'm old or something. So, or whatever, her chi was too corrupted at that point. But it was a cool storyline, and honestly, you can tell kind of what butters the bread in this universe because we're spending a lot of time talking about Gong Li and not a lot of time talking about Bori Khan, who is a good character, kind of generic village raider type guy, strong, ruthless, but ultimately, I think what this movie does well is the men have to take a back seat because there's magic women like floating in the air and like able to kill massive armies by themselves, while the men kind of just struggle and fail. And I don't know, they pull it off in a really good way. And I think if you exclude that character, um, we don't learn as much about Mulan in the movie. And I think that this was, in my opinion, one of the best additions that I've seen to a storyline in a film because it's literally the sort of that almost like Black Mirror, like you could go this way, you could go that way, and I didn't even know they were doing, setting that up the whole time. And when it's revealed, it's like, oh yeah, that's really strong narration. It's a good storytelling.
It's good storytelling. It really is. I was just thinking about it. It really is like Star Wars. So Bori Khan is the Emperor. Our John Long is Darth Vader. Join me, Mulan, and together we will rule the galaxy as which and which, right? And then come on, join me. I can save you. It's too late for me, my Mulan. And then ultimately, Mulan, like Luke Skywalker, saves her. So we got the Star Wars in here, people.
And she has to sacrifice herself, as we'll learn. She turned from the dark side.
Exactly.
It's not her last moment.
It's not force lightning. It's an arrow, but the witch, Vader, they get in the way of that, and they protect our young protagonist. So a lot of parallels here with Star Wars. I'm just figuring this out now as we're talking about it.
Same here, actually. As you're saying that, I'm like, oh yeah, I guess they just repackaged Star Wars. But it was different, okay?
No, but it's still well done though.
Yeah, I mean that really is the strength of Star Wars, and particularly this story. This is as the famous Carl Jung would say, this is the hero's journey. You can go through almost any hero story, and it's all the same, kind of the same thing.
It's all Star Wars.
Yeah, everything is Star Wars if you look hard enough. But no, I mean, look, even with it being kind of Star Wars, you're right. You got this hero who has to make a choice, lighter, dark. We see what the dark side could yield, and there is this, like you mentioned, riches and power and stuff like that. But this character has her honor. She falls back on the three pillars in her devotion to loyalty, bravery, and truth. And because she has this sort of ground and foundation to build off of, even temptation like ultimate power is not, it would never sway this character. She's too good. Like what they did there.
Yeah, great addition. She's the more interesting villain between her and Boricon, but because she works for Boricon, she sort of elevates him. Because if somebody that powerful is going to work for him, well, he must be important. There must be something about him that she's following him. So
unnatural. Last one, I swear.
There's no Darth Plagueis the Wise story in this one though, so we'll move on.
I will say this too, to kind of jump ahead a little bit. In both films, I'll say they could do a better job with dispatching of the big bad. I think, the original film, you get your kind of, like you said, the fireworks, your cannon, shoot them. Oh, okay, cool. In this remake, I thought that fight was going to be a little bit better.
Yeah.
I think they did a better job with some of the fight scenes. So I think another reason why we are talking about Gong Li's Jean La more is because she had the more visually interesting fight scenes.
Right.
And I was kind of expecting a little bit more from the remake in terms of that final fight, but I'm not going to begrudge them too much because it got the job done. But it's just a little side note for myself that if I had to point to a weakness, I would say that could have been a little bit cooler.
Yeah, I thought the actual fight, like, I was a little disappointed because it wasn't that epic and it was a bit short, but I like how it ended because there was a couple callbacks from the way it ended. Number one was Mulan has this cool move that she does where she, like, a staff or something is in the air and then she's able to kick it. So, and it goes, like, right towards the enemy. Cause instead of, like, throwing it, it's like, it's in the air and I'll kick it. So it's a pretty sweet move. She does that to an arrow. And then Boricon, when we were first introduced to him, one of the archers at the gates shoots an arrow at him and he's able to catch it, which is pretty early in the movie, which again reestablished, okay, this isn't exactly playing by our rules, but so there's some magical element to this. But when Mulan does her kick, he's unable to catch that arrow. So I like the callbacks, at least for the very finale of the fight, but I guess like the fight itself was a little lackluster. I see what you mean.
Yeah. Like you said, callbacks were super strong. I just I don't know, like, I kind of fall in the category of I don't necessarily need to see big, long, kind of wire CGI fights, but I don't know, just kind of what they had given us to that point. I was like, oh yeah, epic showdown time.
Yeah.
And it's not quite. It was okay, but it wasn't. It was a bit of a letdown, but definitely not like enough to say, oh, that was terrible.
Yeah.
But, I think it shows the strength of the movie that it built my expectations so much at that point. I'm like, oh, this is going to be really cool. And it was kind of cool.
I think they kind of put themselves in a corner just because they made Mulan so amazing during that one battle where she kind of reveals herself as Mulan. And it's like, where do you go from there? Well, we learned that the answer is there's not much they can go to.
Yeah. And, they had to kind of use some misdirection. I guess Boricon, if I had to give him a superpower, it's ruthless. He'll take advantage of somebody, basically make them his slave just so he can kind of kill a guy that killed his dad, and he's willing to like hold like the emperor hostage, and use that against her in the fight. So I mean, he uses cunning and ruthlessness, but it's not the same as like being able to kind of like float and do backflips and throw magic sleeves at people. There's a lot more cool stuff that Boricon does not have access to in his war chest.
Yeah, I'm gonna be nitpicking here, but Boricon, so he wants to kill the Emperor. I feel like he had a couple of opportunities to do it, and he doesn't quite pull the trigger. Like even very early in the movie, when Jean Long is like disguised as one of the messengers there, I'm like, well, this is a great opportunity for her to just reveal herself, make her knives go everywhere like she does, and then just kill the Emperor right there. And I don't know. No, it's not the time. He must die later. Or I wasn't sure if it was like his hubris, like he can only die by my hand.
That was my take, that he had this stupid obsession of like, I gotta kill the Emperor because he killed my dad.
But even later in the movie, like you said, he, instead of killing him, he ties him up so that Mulan has to save him, and he's sort of used as a distraction. And it's like, you could have killed him, and then you could have focused on her.
Yeah, I just didn't quite understand why he had time to make like molten, iron. It's like, yes, you wait. I'm gonna lower you into this real slow light, and it's gonna suck.
Like I'm a Bond villain.
Yeah. Wait a minute. You led the good guy here. You shouldn't have done that. Boricon, not the strongest villain, but also not the weakest because Shan Yu isn't much stronger. I would say, honestly, really the only Shan Yu part that I kind of really remember, other than I guess when they take the village or like, excuse me, get into the Emperor's village later, but would be that opening sequence where he scales the wall and he's like, "Ah, I got you," and they gotta like put the burn the oil and like show that like we're under attack and stuff like that. Um, and like really the only other kind of strong note for him, and they have something sort of similar in the remake, but like when he's like, well, how many people does it take to give a message? And he kills one of the soldiers that was living to go tell the emperor what was happening. They basically do the same thing to your point with Gong Li's character, but she actually becomes that guy. So it's it's interesting. A lot of help for our big bad in the remake, and it helps the movie. So I'm for it.
That's all I really have to say about our baddies. Do we want to go into some of the other supporting characters?
Sure.
We have a consolidation here in the remake. So we have Li Shang in the original, portrayed by B.D. Wong.
For that, I owe you my life. From now on, you have my trust.
And he's sort of split up into two characters in our remake. He's Commander Tong, portrayed by Donnie Yen.
Your spirit is evident, but something holds you back.
And Chen Huanghui, portrayed by Yosun An.
Oath of the Warrior.
He's portrayed by two different characters because he's supposed to be the leader of this garrison and also our potential love interest with Mulan. And I had read that they decided to make it two different characters and sort of a response to the Me Too movement because they just didn't think it was appropriate for like a soldier and to, I guess, her boss kind of to start a romantic relationship. So they thought maybe if it was somebody of her own rank, it would be a little more acceptable. So, which is a decision I was fine with. It didn't really ruin anything for me, and it kind of made a little more sense because Mulan would be with her soldiers of her own rank more to develop a type of love interest, as opposed to like if you're commanding officer, how often do you really see your commanding officer? It's like, especially like on a personal level, right? It's usually just business when you speak with them.
Like you're saying, I guess there's a universe where maybe they could have given her more interactions with like Donnie Yen and stuff like that. But like that, to your point, I think that would have felt forced. I definitely understand their concerns of basically like the ranking officer and her getting into a relationship. It's a smart choice there. It just takes that question mark out of there.
Yeah.
We don't need to be worried about the power structure of the military and relationships in our movie. So now I like it, and plus it gives Donnie Yen a lot more kind of like free reign to not worry about being a romantic interest and just being kind of like the kick-ass Donnie Yen that we know him as. It just feels a lot more natural when Yosan An's Hong Wei interacts with her. Like, I don't know, they have a pretty good actually chemistry, I would say. It's interesting to make them sort of rivals. Like, they fight against each other. He can tell that she's holding back. There's tension when, she finally takes a bath scene, which weirdly comedic. But, like she won't turn it back. We know why. It's because she's a woman. But, like, he thinks it's because, okay, this is a stubborn kind of soldier. Like, he's like, look, you don't have to like me, but, when it comes time to look out for the troops, you're the strongest one here. Or like, that's his estimation. So it's like, don't give up on them. It was a really, really nice and natural path into that. And I also really appreciate the fact that they give us a hint that they could, be matched up at some point, but don't make it like a central theme. There's a lot of times in movies where it's like, it's the love interest and now they're married and everything ends happily ever after. It's just like, Yeah, see you later, kid. A little Han Solo moment. I'm gonna keep doing that. I don't know. It was just a really clean way to do it, and splitting out the characters allows the training and the love to be just separate things, and I think that was helpful.
Yeah. I mean, even the original animated movie, like they didn't really force that love story down your throat. It's pretty much an afterthought. So for a Disney movie coming out in the '90s to do that, good on them. I did like Chen Honghui in the remake. I thought he was a pretty strong character. He's one of the few characters that's really there, like for Mulan, like really supportive, and just even like when they're rivals, like you said, like he's still like you might not like me, but of course I respect you, and he also is like when Mulan comes back, he's like the first person to speak out. Like we need to trust Mulan. We have to trust this person. So he's for lack of a better term, he's a big cheerleader of Mulan. Very supportive. I like the decision to split the commander and the love interest.
Yeah, no, I 100% agree. To your point, sort of like the cheerleader. Again, because there were these sort of small, not even small, but like these subtle differences. Um, Commander Tung is the one that's like, oh no way. This is there's no way that you're expelled. No women in the army. It's not going to happen. And I was interested in how they're going to do that because in the original, you get sort of BD Wong's character and his choice, which is like a life for a life. It was like, okay, you sacrifice, or excuse me, you saved my life.
Mm-hmm.
So you know what? I know I'm supposed to kill you here. I'm gonna let it slide. We'll just call it a day. They don't really let it off the hook that easy in this original film, at least not in this remake, at least not at first. He's like dishonor, and we had an example of that for Another Soldier as well, which again, this is a strength of the movie is they give you examples of what dishonor looks like, how shameful it can be, what could lead you to be dishonest. You dump a little bit of water out of your bucket, that's it. So this is way more than bucket in the water. This is like your entire identity, and even saving all of our lives, I don't care. You brought shame to my unit, and it takes, like you mentioned, the kind of I am Spartacus moment with Mulan. It's like I trust Val Mulan. I enjoyed that. I liked it. And to your point, for Hong Wei to be the first one to really pipe up there was a strong moment. And by making them sort of obviously not equals because she has magic, but by making them closer to equals, it was a strong choice. Right? So very very nice kind of weird addition by dividing stuff like that. I enjoyed the splitting those characters up.
Again, just not forcing the love story down our throats. I like the ending that's between the two of them, how they sort of go their separate ways. He's like, "Wait, Mulan." She's like, "What?" And she's like, "Well, I don't want you to go." She's like, "Well, you could touch my hand." All right, yeah, I get to touch it. So, I know for the time, I guess that makes sense because the women were all covered up in all the robes and everything. So, they weren't making out, which would have been like, all right, did we need to do this? So I'll take a hand touch over them like going mouth to mouth.
Yeah, I think they've clearly done like their research with the time period, with the costume design, with adhering to different principles and stuff like that. Like it's an appropriate response given sort of the time period and restrictions and stuff like that. So like, and again, for anyone that watches these things for the romance, it's still there. You just build it out in your head, whatever you think happens next, because that's not the main focus of the Mulan story. Really, really well done. The one thing I'll give that original is, look, you can't beat "I'll Make a Man Out of You." That's a classic song. Donny Osmond's some of his best work.
I did not know that Donny Osmond contributed.
Oh yeah, Donny. Yeah, the singing voices are different than the talking voices in the original. And Donny Osmond, yeah, it's weird, but yes, he is the singer of "I'll Make a Man Out of You." It's a really cool training montage. I think the remake does their training sequences very cleanly, but this is one of those few times where I'm gonna say, hey, look, I like a good musical in some regards, and if we were gonna try to like fight it out, I got to throw that in for the original just to give them a fighting chance. But the remake just it just does it so well. Even like it's a lot more interesting even as a shot, like a actual visual for them to climb the mountain with the water bucket than it is her kind of climbing a pole. And the other side of it too is it actually shows again this difference of it's actually her strength, like her ability to like carry this when the men couldn't is physical sort of strength here. Whereas in the original, she was like, "Oh, I'll just take these two sort of weights as they were and wrap them around." And again, it's showing that little divide again, intellect versus
Right.
kind of this magic brawn, as it were.
Mm-hmm. There's not really too many other characters. There's the family we could talk a little bit about, Mulan's family, and then there are the rest of her sort of military buddies we could also sort of talk about. You want to just talk about the family really quick?
Yeah, let's talk about
Okay.
family.
So let's talk about Mulan's family. I'll just read out the cast list here. So we have June Foray as grandmother Fa, Soon Tek O as Fa Zhu, and Frida Fo Shen as Fa Li. These are all characters from the original. And in our remake, we have Zima as Hua Zhao, Rosalind Chow as Hua Li, and Zana Tang as Hua Zhu. And the one major difference between these films is that Mulan has a sister in the remake. In the original, she doesn't have a sister, but she has her grandmother.
I think kind of talking about that big sort of difference I think makes sense here. Again, I don't know a lot about sort of the source material about the ballad or the poem. I don't know if she.
I think she actually had a younger brother in the original
Okay.
poem. I think.
I think from a storytelling kind of artistic standpoint, making a sister is probably a smart choice because we get to see the juxtaposition of sort of doing it kind of the right way by her society standards and doing it the Mulan way. Um, it gives her an immediate peer, and it also kind of changes that matchmaker scene as well. Whereas in the original, it's kind of Mulan just being, I guess, a little sort of clumsy, really, in that moment. Still kind of not her fault, actually, that the cricket was there. Not really.
Yeah. No, it's her grandmother's fault. I totally blame the grandmother in the original.
100%. And then this remake, just making it that spider and having us know that her sister's afraid of spiders. You feel bad for her there too, because like it's not like she's just being an idiot here. It's like, all right, like she's actually looking out for her sister. So she, again, this idea, this remake plays with this idea actually a bit. Instead of just loyalty, bravery, and truth, she also has family devotion. So Mulan constantly is looking out for her family. So the sister is just another person in her family to look out for before we get sort of the big, I'm taking my father's armor and going to fight in the war. So I think it's a strong choice. I don't love the sister's kind of portrayal, and I don't think it has anything to do with the actress. I just think that when you have this like sort of Superwoman, Wonder Woman type character, to have like kind of the just generic sister takes away from that character.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
But I do like the choice from a storytelling standpoint.
Yeah, I don't think the sister really does anything interesting, but she does help flesh Mulan out a little bit more. I like what you said, like she has a peer, somebody to relate to more her own age, and just somebody to really be more herself, right? Because when she's around her parents, she's trying to be that daughter that's trying to bring honor to her family, so she's not fully herself. But when she's with her sister, she's a little more relaxed, a little more playful, a little more herself. So, I don't know if she really gets to do that so much around like her grandmother in the cartoon. Like the grandmother is definitely just there for comic relief. Like everything she does is just a joke after joke. So I was fine with getting rid of her, and her family, while they're a big motivation for her, they're not really in the forefront of like what's happening for the story. Our main focus is Mulan. So as long as they're helping to flesh out her character, I'm fine with any changes that the remake did.
Yeah, that's ultimately it. Like when it comes to some of these other characters, like the mom especially is kind of like background. I would say the mother in the remake has more of a role than the mother in the original because she wears her disappointment a little bit more on her sleeve. Like she's very traditional, whereas in the original, the mom's kind of just like you mentioned, backdrop. She's not even comic relief. She's just more or less there to be like, you're running late. I mean, that's about her contribution. She's much closer to her father in both films. In the original, the father, I mean, because we can just skip the mom, to be honest. The father cares about Mulan, but there's not exactly the same relationship. It's not like he's sort of allowed her to just kind of be herself and takes responsibility for the fact that like she doesn't fit into societal standards. He's still like a place of refuge for her in some regards, but like it really hits her hard when her father in the original says, "Mulan, you dishonor me." That's kind of where you can see that her relationship with her father is super important to her, and to have him say that, everyone else can say it, but to have him say that was a big blow to her. In the remake, I don't know, that gets kind of like distributed out amongst multiple characters a little bit more. Like the mother's already kind of disappointed. The sister's like, well, you just do it like me, And the father ultimately is like, I don't know, it's like, this is kind of my fault. I should have like tried to make you understand that like you not like conceding to societal norms would bring us a lot of peril and danger. So my bad.
Yeah. Yeah, I think I kind of agree with you. I think the relationship between her father is actually a little bit stronger in that original film. I was kind of hoping they would flesh that out in the remake, but I don't feel like they did. He still does care about her and like kind of wants her to be who she is by kind of letting her practice her chi and not really interfering with that. But at the end of the day, he's going to be like, look, you better fucking do what I say, okay? Because you better honor this family. So I thought he was not as warm in the remake. But, he still pretty much did what he had to do. But I just think overall, it seemed a little bit stronger in the original.
Yeah, that original father, and again, sort of like expectations. We said something similar about like the big bad. Once they start introducing these elements, we're like, all right, what are they going to do with Bori Khan here? The father is such a strong influence in this original film. And I'm like, all right, well, hell, this is like one of the roles in the film, and I just didn't get the same notes. I guess the story about the Phoenix or whatever, but it's a generic story about a Phoenix. We've heard Phoenix stories before. Him being mad at her didn't have the same weight, as that original film. It just was like, okay, like she's got this duty, she's honor bound by a lot of things. But like in that original film, the entire emphasis, because like everyone else is such background, like she really wants to make her dad proud, and when she doesn't, it really affects her. When her dad's not that proud in this remake, it doesn't seem to be that big a deal. It just seems that she's concerned that he's going to have to go back out and fight again. I guess if we want to make a parallel, they do, I think, a better job of outlining the father's military background in the remake. Like he's gone to battle before, he's seen the Phoenix in battle. It's a little bit more apparent in conversations with some of the soldiers that Zoe has like renown. He's a war hero, which is true in the original, but like I don't know, that part of him is fleshed out more in the remake. But ultimately, because he's not in the film that much, I don't know why it needed to be more fleshed out.
Yeah, I didn't notice too much more acknowledgement of his service in the remake. I thought like some generals knew who her father was in both films, and that's pretty much as far as it goes. It didn't really influence too much of how they treated Mulan as Huajun in the remake, I didn't think. Mm-hmm. So, I don't know, it seemed pretty even to me.
Yeah, that's fair. I would say in terms of like if we're making the sort of apples to apples comparison that we've done in the past, the father in my opinion, is much stronger in the original for kind of arbitrary reasons. I guess maybe they just drew him nice. You know?
I don't know. He just seemed warmer to me, like more
Yeah, I
accepting
agree.
of who Mulan was. In the remake, I didn't get that so much. Like, hell or high water, she's gonna be a good wife to somebody, and like, yeah, she can do her chi thing, but she better smarten up and get that matchmaker to make her a match. You know, I don't, it just
Yeah,
he didn't seem as warm. So, bottom line, he just seemed warmer in that original film.
yeah. Now in the aggregate though, because it kind of matters a little bit more in the remake, I would say that the overall family as a whole is slightly, I say this, very slightly stronger in the remake. And I think part of that is one, you're removing the grandmother who's just there for the jokes. You're including a sister, which again goes back into their storytelling. They very quickly in this movie sort of give you a lot of societal norms through different characters. So it's a pretty strong portrayal. And ultimately, because one of the pillars and one of the highlights of this Mulan
Right.
is family devotion. Family is quite literally thrust onto an altar and made more important in this film. So I really do like the dad in the original, but
Yeah.
overall, the family's very strong in the remake.
Yeah, that family devotion pillar is pretty prominent in the remake. So, yeah, they definitely emphasize the importance of family.
Yep. To the point that they even added to her new sword and make her read it out loud.
Yeah. What does that say for our American audience watching? Okay, I mean, that's all I really have to say about the family. They are, in the end, pretty minor characters. We do spend a little more time with Mulan's army buddies. So maybe we could just go into some of the differences there. There's a lot more in the remake, and there's the prominent three in the original. I don't know. Do you have the names or any specific?
I don't have too many names. I'll like lead in with some of the characters because in the original,
Okay.
like you've got Harvey Firestein, probably the most prominent, playing Yao. And honestly, after that, I do fall off. Like I really just want to make special note of Harvey Firestein because he's the most sort of recognizable and relevant character. After that, to be honest, man, like if we want to go over individual names, we can, but like they're not that important.
I guess because we only have like the main three in the original, I guess it's a little bit easier to sort of follow what they're doing. In the remake, we have a ton of army buddies. I don't even want to get into all of them, but like we only really care about the potential love interest one. They're obviously there for comic relief in both films. They kind of have personality in the remake. There's one part where they're all sitting and talking about girls they like, and so you get a little taste of their personality, but ultimately the main focus in the remake is really the love interest. So the rest of the guys kind of fall by the wayside. I'd say their army buddies in the original are actually a little bit stronger just because there's fewer of them, so we could spend more time with them individually. And
Yao Ling, I forget the third, but
Chen Po maybe.
Yeah, Chin Po. Yeah.
Okay.
So like you mentioned, I think they're stronger. They spend more time with each other. Those characters are fleshed out in their own way. They have their own kind of like ticks throughout the film that are kind of like outlined in both of the sort of major songs in there, whether it's "I'll Make a Man Out of You" or "Girl Worth Fighting For," which is an interesting number. But like, yeah, Firestein's Yao is like a tough guy. He punches people first and asks questions later. I believe is it Ling that's the tall one, or is that Chen Po who's the sort of the big
I think
kind of teddy bear?
That might be Chen Po.
Yeah, like Chen Po, who sort of our gentle giant character, and Ling, who's kind of like really slapstick comic relief. I don't know. It's just they're just so easily defined because they fit into these neat little categories. Whereas in the remake, there's a guy that like he thinks highly of himself and likes to punch people, but like you mentioned, that's kind of like doled out too amongst the love interest as well because he's like a direct rival to Mulan. and then they sort of consolidate one of the army guys into the cricket, which was interesting. I don't know. They really don't get that much time to shine though in the remake. They really are kind of helpless. I I remember kind of looking over at one point to Free and saying, I can't believe they're still fighting in this hallway.
Yeah, they kind of mislead us because first it's when we come back to the hallway, like at the end. First, it's just Huang Hui kind of by himself, and you're thinking, "Oh my God, is everybody dead?" But then they change the camera angle, and you see, "Oh, everybody's alive." But then you see one guy looks like maybe he's dead, and then no, he's just yawning. So it's like, okay, so nobody died. so a little misdirection. I feel like I know this is a family movie at the end of the day, but it is a war movie. Maybe one guy could have been expendable. There's a lot of them in the remake, so one of them could have went.
I don't know. Even giving somebody like a minor injury, like he took a sword to the shoulder, No, yeah, like more or less, no one dies. I did make a note actually. I'm glad you said that. That in the battle when Mulan's still sort of she hasn't shed her skin. She's not really Mulan yet. She's Hua Jun, and she's wearing like red outfit, red, very important color in Chinese history and tradition and stuff like that. And I started to name these other characters the yellow shirts because, like, if you, unlike the red shirts in Star Wars, like anyone wearing a yellow shirt was just like, oh my God, that guy's dead. That guy's dead. Those guys didn't seem to matter much, but yeah, no. If you were in the core group, like if you had a name, you're not dying in this movie, unless you're a bad guy. Like that's the only way you're dying in this film. So they were trying to keep that sort of PG rating going there.
They don't even have blood, like, really, in the movie. This is a war movie, and the only blood I remember seeing is when Mulan cut the witch's hand. It's just to push her away. I think that's the only even blood. I know it's just understandable. At the end of the day, this is supposed to be a children's war movie, or a remake of a children's war movie. So, I mean, that's okay. But, we're saying it's a little more gritty. It's gritty to a point. It's not really violent. There's not really any gore, and nobody really dies. So there's like nobody on the good team, at least that's important. So the stakes are still pretty low for our gritty remake here.
Yeah, I would say that the stakes are low. Actually, it is good that we're talking about these side characters because one, if you have a name, you're not taking a Talon shuriken to the to the chest. The closest thing to like devastation on the warfield is they put their shields up to block
right.
the witch. She becomes a series like hawks or crows or something like that. I don't know. There's a bunch of birds flapping, and then the other guys are like creating these like sort of firebomb. They're not cannonballs. It's not cannon, but like the little balls in a catapult. They explode when they hit people. But you see none of the details of that. You don't even stop to think about the implication. I will say this, since we are talking about the army guy, I think that after that battle, I would say that the film starts to lose some of its ground to how it handles the action to the original because after that battle, it seems like, all right, we got to hit these notes to kind of finish out this movie. And I felt it was very strange. Her expulsion was very temporary and strange.
Mm-hmm.
Them just being like I said, the Spartacus moment was just like, okay, yeah, we believe you. Then they kind of ride out and sort of save the day. But like, I felt like they were doing such a good job of like mounting, building, right. Getting to this moment that once she was truly revealed, they're like, well, now it's Mulan, so like let's finish the job. I thought it was a little strange. It wasn't like this movie is now bad, but it was like they seem to be kind of like rushing towards this sort of known ending here. I thought it was a little strange.
It was a little weird because, I mean, just look at the timestamps of when those things happen in both respective films. It happens pretty late in the original animated film when Mulan's kicked out. I'd say maybe there's 15, 20 minutes left in that film. In the remake, when she gets expelled, there's like still 40 minutes of film to go.
Right.
So that's kind of the big climax too. Like Mulan's revealed. Now what's going to happen? Everything seems like it's going terrible because now she's kicked out of the army, and the bad guy's still out there, and what's going to happen? So yeah, there's just they had so much time, and it's like, well, what are we going to do with all this time now? So I think it was just maybe too early to have her do all that stuff to be revealed. It should have maybe happened a little later in the film, I think.
Later in the film, or different, like in the original, if I'm remembering right, like she kind of finds out about the plot, and then sort of shows up in the city, right? Like I think from what I remember, and I think she then has to kind of convince them that the Huns are still coming, because like she saw the Huns, they didn't in the original, from what I recall. In this remake, she just kind of comes back. She's like, well, look, they are gonna go, so you have to believe me. But
she has a conversation with the witch. That's what.
Yeah, no, I know she has a conversation with the witch, but it's like she goes and she has this conversation, and she's like, okay, they're still there, but like, I guess what I'm saying though is that like the way she reveals it to the rest of the troops is slightly different, and I think it made a little bit more sense in the original, because like the danger was like impending. They were already kind of like in the set piece for it, whereas like in the remake, you just had this big deal about her being expelled. And then they immediately just turn around and like listen to her because, kind of just because. And I think if they had found a different way to get there, I think I would have been more okay. To your point with the timestamps, it just it felt strange. I think the expulsion and the return were a little too close together. There probably should have been some different action in between to make that transition a little bit smoother. That sort of falls into like nitpicking territory. It was a little jarring, but it wasn't like I was able to get back on the ride. I just thought that like, you made too much of a deal about that expulsion. You were sort of better off with like a life for a life there, versus like General or Commander Tung being like, nah, so much shame, so much dishonor, never come back. If I see you again, you're dead. And then it was like, well, you see her again and she's not dead. Like
he does say, bring me my sword, and then she's like, well, you can kill me, but listen to me first. So, but I get what you're saying. Yeah, maybe they should have done it like the original. Let's all just be already at the Emperor's place, and then that way we can just go. We don't have to have this journey from, I got to go to your barracks, and then we got to travel together and do all this stuff.
But at the same time, in this particular film, you can't do that, because if the witch or Gong Li's character doesn't see Mulan leading an army, that falls apart too. So like, it works. I have a slight preference for that transition, but overall the remake, I think, gets to go in and do a lot more interesting things leading up to that final fight, because in the original it's just like, oh, they're coming, and then it's fireworks, and now it's fireworks at the bad guy. It's not as clean.
I will give it this to the original though, because there was all the emphasis on like, be a man, and you gotta make a man out of you and stuff. In order for them to infiltrate the palace though, they have to dress up as women. So it's, it just turns that whole be a man thing, kind of turns that around. So that was a nice little callback in the original film.
Yeah.
Obviously something you could only get away with in an animated film. If the men in the remake started dressing up like women to infiltrate the palace, they would be like, really? This is what we're doing now? So, it was just a nice little touch in the original.
Absolutely. And to your point about like sensitivity, that could be,
Exactly.
you don't need things getting out of hand. Like, you're really just trying to recount a story, and you don't fall into a landmine you don't have to.
Exactly. Yeah. Why bring up that conversation if we can avoid it completely?
Mm-hmm.
So,
but again, that to me falls squarely in the camp of nitpicking. There was just really, those are the two things I can think of: the final fight and sort of that transition back to her being in the good graces. I found those were a bit awkward, but still, worked. I do want to just make a special side note that I think the Emperor choice in both films was fantastic.
Good casting there.
Pat Morita is the man. Jet Li is awesome.
I didn't even recognize Jet Li, and it wasn't until the credits. I was like, oh, it's Jet Li. Quick question. I could be completely wrong. Did they dub over Jet Li, or was that his voice?
I don't know.
It didn't. I don't know. I had like little trouble, like the voice coming out of his mouth and just the way he was talking. It just didn't. It didn't look like it matched to me. I could be completely wrong, but I thought, are they dubbing some of these characters? I didn't find anything about that.
I wouldn't be surprised if they dub some of the characters, because I think that there's going to be a huge emphasis on this in Asian markets. When you look at even like costume design and stuff like that, like I was sitting there, I was like, oh yeah, that's really going to play well with like Chinese audiences, whether it's like Mulan's outfit and like the Emperor's sort of that golden armor and stuff like that. Like all of these are sort of big cultural like references and stuff like that. So I was like, oh, this is going to be awesome. So I wouldn't be surprised if he did that in like Chinese and they were just like, all right, we're going to dub it so we have the English cut as well. Like, I think you would make that sacrifice in this particular case, because I think on a profit margin, I think you're going to do better overseas with this film, and you're probably more interested in that audience than you are even in American audience.
Yeah. Yeah, it was just, I don't know, something about the Emperor specifically, it just seemed a little off. So I'm thinking he was dubbed. I could be completely wrong and just seeing things that aren't really there.
I wouldn't be surprised if he was. Let's put it that way.
All right, let us know if anybody finds out. All right, you want to get into the music now?
Just a little bit. Yeah. The music, like you said, in the remake, there's a few moments where you'll hear like a chord or a little like snippet of the music. Christina Aguilera in the credits gets redo her song. Apparently, the song "Reflections" from Mulan was Christina Aguilera's first single. So this is a decades-long return to her Mulan sort of roots.
Good for her.
Yeah, but like honestly, there's a few songs that I think are just like Bring Honor to Us All. I think it's just one of the sort of cleanest intros to a character that I've seen in like a musical. Knocks out a lot of the sort of character work right there in that song. So I think that you can't do it again in a remake. It wouldn't work. But I like how they introduced the character there, and I think it's probably one of the reasons why the remake decided to sort of introduce the young Mulan character. The training montage, in a weird way, because like obviously like this remake takes a lot of care and attention to the training, but like that campy, I'll make a man out of you montage, it just kind of works, like it works really well with the comedy, blending it with like the idea of like we're training for a war. So I definitely wanted to highlight those two songs, but honestly, outside of that, like A Girl Worth Fighting For isn't that great of a song. It's a little too jokey and campy, but like honestly, other than that, I really don't have a lot to say about the music, but I did want to highlight those two like critically sort of acclaimed songs. I think that if you take those out of the film in that original, it's not as solid as a product. So I just wanted to take a moment to highlight those and give a little Christina Aguilera trivia, if anyone cares.
And just to add to that song, I think, was it Reflection? Oh, yeah, the song Reflection. I think that our Mulan, Liu Yifei, actually sang a Mandarin version of the song. And I think you could hear that in the credits as well.
I believe you're right.
Yeah. So I just wanted to mention that too, because you do start with Christina Aguilera's and then it does turn to Mandarin, and I don't think that's Christina Aguilera singing that part. No offense against her, I'm sure she's talented, but I'm not sure how strong she is with the Mandarin language.
That was a literal question that my wife had for me when we were watching. It was like, is that Christina Aguilera? It's like I don't think so, not anymore. I was being a bit of an idiot though. I was like, oh, you could do it phonetically. it's like I don't know, because my wife has taken Chinese like classes in like I believe high school and college a little bit, and she was like, she's even getting the tones right, and that's pretty hard for Christina Aguilera to pull that off, I imagine.
I mean, she can't even sing Spanish well, so
I 100% agree. But we're not here to bash Christina Aguilera.
That's an old Futurama joke. I'm sorry.
We do that in our free time.
Okay. Is there anything else we want to cover? Do we want to talk about any of the battles or the fight choreography? Because that's a big sort of addition to the remake, is
Yeah,
the fighting and stuff.
I just like I was saying, they hit the battle so well when it's sort of a big battle. Like I think they do that really well. I think that in the remake they do struggle with the one on one a little bit, but like I found that big sort of battlefield fight, like you mentioned, Dynasty Wars,
Yeah.
it felt a lot like that.
Yep.
They were able to sort of show the chaos of the battle really cleanly while still keeping it interesting. And again, because they did that so well, I had such high hopes for everything that was going to follow. And some of it didn't quite measure up, but like in that moment, I think they nailed it.
Yeah, the big battle in the middle of the film is definitely like one of the highlights for me when it comes to the action. Mulan's pretty badass on her horse, part of the cavalry. She's chasing after Bori Khan and pretty Mongolian in the style of attack there. They're shooting arrows off their horse at each other. It's pretty badass. And like
Very
you
good
said
choreography.
before, the yellow shirts, everybody that's going with Mulan, they're all getting picked off one by one. And only Mulan's like smart enough to be like, oh, maybe I should dodge it. Or she's the only one who has like the force to see like an arrow's incoming, so I'm just gonna slightly move out of the way, just
You
like
get
Neo.
that sort of Matrix dodge.
Yeah, she did
off
kind
the
of do
horse.
have a Matrix thing there on her horse.
I really thought the choreography on the horses was so well done. Like,
Yeah.
real kudos to like to be riding the horse, doing the turn. You know, they must have had some really good riders on that cast. It was fantastic, actually.
Yeah, shooting arrows at each other on horseback, that's not something we see all the time in these war movies, so that was really awesome to see. And then what happens? Mulan gets into that one-on-one fight with the witch, and it's pretty decent choreography. She's a little outmatched because she wasn't being her true self. I was kind of bummed though, because I thought like after she became her true self, I thought they would have like kind of a rematch right there, but then the witch is already gone and she just goes out and fights kind of regular soldiers, Mulan, which was awesome. What'd you think of the decision? Because in the original animated film, every time Mulan fights, she's kind of wearing armor. And I get it, like, oh, this is Mulan, she's a woman, and she's got this chi, but I just think a little armor might help her. I would feel a little safer if she wore a little bit of that armor. I know she was somebody else when she wore that armor, but
Sure.
maybe a little armor.
Yeah, maybe. I think obviously, I think it was a choice, and I think they really just wanted that visual. You know, it's a very sort of striking dress. You see a few people in the film that like are able to use like their sleeves and stuff like that. Like this sort of fantastical magic happens where your sleeve can extend and hit people. The Emperor does it at one point. The Witch does it at certain points. I just think that they had this again. Cheers to the costume design department. They had this like badass dress, and they're like, we're gonna go out in this. To your point, it can distract if you're thinking, all right, there's a battle. Like you don't want to take an arrow to the knee like the Last Adventure. But like I don't know, it's such a striking visual. Her riding back into the battle in this sort of red dress get up that I'll allow it. I think Mulan in the original, to your point, that's sort of I've got the battle armor, but like I'm clearly like a woman again or whatever. Like it's a cool design in terms of excuse me, in terms of the drawing and stuff like that. But like I don't even think they were going for that in this moment. But I agree with you. You know, there could be armor there, but it was worth taking sort of that big swing with the outfit, in my opinion.
Yeah, I'm just nitpicking.
Yeah.
I was a little worried. That's all. I just
Yeah.
wanted you to know I was worried about Mulan. I thought she looked cool, but I can worry still.
But no, I mean, look, I do, to your point, wish that there was more of a rematch between honestly the two most interesting characters in the film,
Yeah.
which are Mulan and like this sort of claw powers. 'Cause I would like to see her powers fully realized in a fight. You know, we don't really
Right.
quite get that. Maybe like the animated film, they'll do a Mulan 2.
I think they are planning to do a sequel.
I bet they are. I bet they are. So And then a lot of stuff that was left sort of unfinished, like you said, bigger battles, more of her powers, the love interest. I'm sure they'll get around to all that next time they want to take $30 out of our bank accounts. The real shame of this is that because of the pandemic, they didn't get to realize their sort of big screen ambitions for this. This, I imagine, would have been a sort of big, 2020 cultural moment for Disney, and it's blunted here. I think they're still going to get a decent, return on this investment, but like it's not the same, man. It's not the same as that big screen, like
I
we
know.
mentioned Star Wars, going there, eating the popcorn and looking at the screen. But very well. We haven't talked about what we thought yet.
Yeah, I mean, this definitely I would have wanted to see on a big screen. I mean,
I
a
agree.
huge war epic. That's just a feast for the eyes, and then just hearing the loud rumbles of war over those huge speakers. Yeah, so a bit of a bummer there, but at least we are able to see it instead of just not see it.
I wouldn't be surprised if they did some sort of limited run like next year when things
Yeah,
are like
a limited re-release once things have calmed down. That makes sense.
because even though I now own it because of the $30, like I agree with you. I would like to see this epic as it was kind of intended to be watched.
All right, so we talked about all the differences, what we liked and what we didn't like. So here we are. Reggie, should the remake of Mulan exist?
I'll say this: unlike some of the other kind of recent entries into this sort of live action Disney universe, um, without question, this movie should exist. It did a lot of things that I know that we talk about when it comes to remakes. It it just made its own thing. It staked its own claim. There's subtle references to the original, but they make choices that are just like, all right, we're going to lean more either into the legend or the folklore. We're going to make our own thing. Like you can't make this like an animated musical. Uh, and I'm glad that we didn't get like a Les Mis type situation here. The entire time I was watching it, I was thinking, except for towards the end, because like I mentioned, there were some shakier moments towards the end when it came to pacing and some of the fights. But like overall, I was watching, I was like, wow, what a testament to this sort of story. Like they really kind of nailed this tonally. I thought that it was a beautifully shot film. Some of the CGI was, but overall the visuals were more or less spectacular. It was in general paced really well. The characters were likable. You lose a little bit of like that dad charm, but you get so much more in so many different characters. And just that story between Mulan and sort of Gong Li's character, it was worth the exploration there because I think it really elevated the film. So this is a movie that not only should exist, I recommend that people go see it because they really did take, you can tell in movies when they like someone puts their heart into it, and I think this cast really believed in what they were doing, and I think they should all be applauded for this effort. It was a good film. I would argue a great film, not the greatest, but it was a great film.
Yeah. Yeah, I'm just going to come out and say, yeah, I agree with you. This remake should absolutely exist. I was very happy that it was not just a one-to-one translation of the original film. I might be showing my hand here for future episodes, but a lot of those remakes are just that, and I do get bored when it's just that. And, taking subject matter like war and making it a little more mature, a little more gritty. Not to the extent that a war movie can be, because at the end of the day, this is still a Disney family film, so I understand that we're a little held back by that. But I still think they did a great job with it. It is a longer runtime, which is usually a no-no in my book when it comes to these remakes, but I didn't really feel it. I really enjoyed the interpretation. I thought the character portrayals were excellent. I thought the new characters were great. Usually new characters, it's just scary it's just scary to introduce a new character to these films because, well, I liked what they did back then, but if it's a good character like our witch was, then I'm all about it. You get rid of some things from some when we talk about like the songs or some of the humor is lost, but it makes sense when we're talking about a war epic. You have to lose some of these little more childish elements, and I think that you want a more mature movie too, because the children that saw Mulan, in the 90s. Now they're adults. So, yeah, this will speak to them. Oh, wow. Yeah, they really upped the ante here with this new Mulan. So they'll definitely dig it. I think anybody who's likes a war film, a good war film, this is an excellent depiction of it. I love ancient Chinese war films. I love the Dynasty Warriors series. I thought the fight choreography was excellent. Like you said, it doesn't hit those high notes every time, but I thought it was still really fun to watch. It had a really good flow overall. Like you said, not a perfect film, but definitely an enjoyable ride and one of the stronger remakes I remember seeing.
Yeah, that definitely came out of my mouth a couple of times throughout the film. It was like, this is such a strong remake. It's like, this is how people look at this template. This is what you do. Was there a cricket? Lose a freaking cricket. Just making some guy named Cricket, and okay, we got the reference. But the one thing too that I do want to make sure we note here is that set design and costume design are also the stars of this film.
Yes.
And I think we'd be remiss in this podcast without saying that the costume design is absolutely gorgeous. It's so well done.
Yeah.
The sets are really good. The Emperor's throne room, it looks incredible. Those just wide shots of China, it's a beautifully shot film. Again, some of the CGI brings it down in some points, but overall, it's just a really good looking film with a very strong cast and a very strong story.
Mm-hmm. And it got pretty emotional too. There was a lot of moments where I was getting choked up, some powerful moments in this movie. So, yeah, I definitely held back a little bit. Wow, this is pretty intense. I like what's happening. Yeah, but to your point, it was a beautiful movie. Just to look at, just gorgeous. The scenery, the costume design, everything's just gorgeous to look at. So yeah, they outdid themselves with this one. I didn't see anything go, oh, that's kind of stupid looking, or that's kind of out of place. Everything looked gorgeous in this film.
That I mean, we didn't really talk about it much, but Mulan's village, the way they were able to capture that sort of, it's a small village, but it feels big, and it does feel like everyone's kind of over top each other. I'm not really sure how it works, but
it's cool. It's this circle, and then all the doors are on the inside parts of the circle, and they're all facing out. It's pretty interesting design. It's not something I don't think I'd seen before.
This is one of those movies where I would go get a hardcover, the art from Mulan. I would check that out because it was that visually striking.
Yeah, the whole time my wife was just going, "This is gorgeous." I'm yeah, this is these sets are incredible.
Only I'd seen it on big screen. I need a projector now.
I know. But awesome. All right, so that's what we thought. What did you guys think? Did you agree? Did you disagree? Did we miss anything? Let us know. We love your feedback. I guess we got to figure out what we're doing next, right?
I don't know where to go from here. You can't go wrong. Halloween.
You want to do Halloween? I'll do Halloween.
I mean, it's just right there.
Right? It's what do we got? John Carpenter and I think Rob Zombie did the remake. Okay, so all right. We'll do Halloween for our Halloween episode.
Yeah.
There we go.
The kids are all grown up. It's our first Halloween episode.
Ooh, spooky. All right, so next episode, Halloween. Okay. Well, thanks for listening to Retro versus Remake. If you're listening on iTunes, we would greatly appreciate any reviews or 5-star ratings. It would greatly help us out. If you're on YouTube, of course, leave us comments. We love reading those comments. We're also on Instagram, Twitter, Facebook, all at Retro versus Remake.
I'm Reggie Parker at RP Comedy on Twitter and Instagram. Hopefully you've been enjoying some of the clips that we've been throwing up on the Retro versus Remake page. More to come, and that's it.
All right, well, thanks for listening. This has been another episode of Retro versus Remake.